Welcome to Talking Tactics. This week was full of news, both true and fake. The Kremlin news agency TASS and state media RIA Novosti both published reports claiming that the Russian army was redeploying troops from the left bank of the river Dnipro to, quote, more advantageous positions further east. The report also stated that elements of these forces would be redeployed to other parts of the front line. In other words, they said Russian troops were retreating from the bank of the river Dnipro and would concentrate their efforts elsewhere. Both TASS and RIA withdrew the reports just minutes later. The news agency TASS apologized publicly, taking responsibility for publishing an incorrect report. The Russian Ministry of Defense called the reports false and a provocation. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov responded to a question about the situation by stating that only the Russian military can and should comment on these things. Now, some voices in Russia are calling this the result of a Ukrainian disinformation campaign, others a blooper. Ukrainians say they have nothing to do with it. It's the usual blame game. The bottom line is, we have not seen a large-scale rotation or even retreat of Russian forces in the past days. Although, to be fair, it's not the first time a rotation of troops in this area has been of concern. In summer, the 7th Airborne Division was pulled out of the left bank and replaced with less experienced troops in a move that seemed to be part of a political power struggle in the Russian army. You can check out our video on that topic by clicking on the link in the description. The airborne troops in the region were replaced by the newly created 18th Combined Arms Army, which consists in large part of ill-trained mobilized men, but not only. Russian Marines and the 10th Spetsnaz Brigade, so Russian Special Forces, are also deployed in the vicinity of Krynky, right now the hottest point along the river. Anyway, let's leave the sphere of Russian fake news and focus on the situation at hand. The islands, formed by the main channel of the river Dnipro and its branches downstream from the Kakhovka Dam, became the target of Ukrainian landing troops after the liberation of the right bank in November 2022. By the end of March 23, Ukrainian detachments were able to seize large parts of Potemkin Island on the Dnipro and were conducting small raids all along the river. By May, the armed forces of Ukraine had forced Russian troops off most of the islands in the vicinity of the city of Kherson, but holding these positions due to drones and artillery fire was extremely difficult. Then in June, most probably because of the start of the Ukrainian counteroffensive, the Russians blew up the Nova Kakhovka Dam, drowning the reservoir and flooding the entire region from the dam till the Black Sea. The water levels have dropped again quite a bit, but not completely, and while the right bank is higher than the left, the flooding has created a more extreme version of what the territory was already before. Mostly wet, swampy terrain with many little streams and islands. In other words, not ideal territory for any sort of maneuver, definitely not ideal for large-scale operations including heavy equipment. Still, in July, the Ukrainian army managed to establish a stable bridgehead near Dachi, in shadow of the destroyed Antonovsky Bridge. But until now, they have failed to develop this foothold into a larger offensive, again due to constant Russian drone and artillery strikes. In parallel, Ukrainian troops managed to gain control over almost the entire territory of unpopulated islands upstream during the past months, up to the Kakhovskaya hydroelectric power plant. So, the strategy has turned to diversifying and establishing many smaller footholds or bridgeheads. Along this sector, there are attempts to advance from these islands onto the mainland at multiple different points, like near Poima and further upstream near an old solar panel field. In October, Ukraine launched a larger-scale operation, which resulted in establishing a foothold here, in Krynky. The Ukrainian armed forces forced their way up the Konka River and occupied at least the western part of the village, as can be seen from numerous videos of Russian troops striking Ukrainian infantry. According to the Institute for the Study of War and footage available, Ukrainians have continuously been making small gains, also thanks to aerial support by units like the Magyar Birds, who have been pounding Russian armored vehicles in the area. But again, this footage from Ukrainian Marines crossing the river and advancing towards Krynky shows just how difficult and dangerous crossing the Dnipro is. The terrain makes any effort to advance unbelievably strenuous and slow. If you are lucky enough to be covered by fog, then that's a good day. But when the sky is clear, being slow and exposed is not an ideal combination. Apart from drones and artillery, there's not much that the Ukrainian armed forces can do to support their advancing infantry. There is, of course, already a lot of speculation about what these small Ukrainian advances mean and what could happen next. And of course, gaining a foothold and establishing bridgeheads on the left bank is essential, because in best case, Ukraine is able to exercise pressure on Russian troops not only from the northeast, but also from the northwest, attacking from two flanks. But we are still far from that point, because as mentioned before, getting infantry over the river is already extremely dangerous. The next step, which would be to transport heavy equipment over the river, is a whole other ballgame. That's it for Talking Tactics this week. Thanks for watching, hit like and subscribe, and see you next week.